For years, comfort was the quiet goal behind almost every decision I made. I told myself I was being sensible, choosing the safer job, the familiar routine, the easier conversation. But underneath that sensible language was a simple truth: I was afraid of friction. I wanted a life with the edges sanded off. Soft mornings, predictable days, low-stakes choices. It felt like peace. For a long time, it even felt like success. But somewhere along the way, comfort stopped feeling like peace and started feeling like a slow kind of numbness. I noticed it first in small ways: a restlessness I couldn't name, a sense that months were passing without leaving a mark on me. I hadn't failed at anything, but I also hadn't tried anything. I had built a life so carefully insulated from risk that it had also become insulated from meaning. This is the story of how I noticed that, what it cost me to keep chasing comfort, and why I finally decided to stop. Comfort is seductive because it never announces itself as a trap. It arrives disguised as self-care, as prudence, as just being realistic. I avoided the harder conversation because it felt kinder to keep the peace. I stayed in the familiar role because leaving felt reckless. I said no to the trip, the pitch, the blunt feedback, the uncomfortable workout, the vulnerable relationship, not because I lacked the capacity, but because each of those things asked something of me that comfort didn't. What I didn't understand back then is that comfort has a compounding cost, much like debt. Each time I chose the easy path, I wasn't just avoiding a single moment of discomfort, I was training myself to keep avoiding it. My tolerance for difficulty shrank. Tasks that should have felt like manageable challenges began to feel like threats. I became more fragile, not less, the more I protected myself from friction. Ironically, the pursuit of comfort was making me less comfortable in my own life, because I was constantly on guard against anything that might disturb the fragile equilibrium I had built. There's a particular kind of stagnation that comfort produces. It doesn't look like failure. It looks like stability. From the outside, nothing seems wrong. But from the inside, there's a hollowness, the sense that you are the same person you were 5 years ago, not because you've mastered something, but because you never let yourself be tested. I started to realize that the things I was most proud of in my life, a hard-won skill, a relationship that survived real conflict, a decision I made despite being terrified, none of them had come from comfort. They had come from the moments I let myself be uncomfortable on purpose. The shift didn't happen all at once. It started with a small, almost embarrassing realization. I envied people who seemed alive, not happy in a shallow sense, but alive in the way that comes from being tested and choosing to stay in the fight anyway. They weren't chasing an absence of difficulty. They were chasing something worth the difficulty. And that distinction rearranged how I thought about my own choices. I began to ask a different question before making decisions. Instead of "will this be easy?" I started asking, "will this make me more capable, more honest, more myself?" Sometimes those two questions pointed in the same direction. Often they didn't. When they diverged, I started choosing the second one, even when it scared me. Practically, this meant seeking out friction on purpose. I picked up physical challenges that had a real chance of failure. I had the conversations I'd been avoiding, even when I didn't know how the other person would respond. I said yes to opportunities one wasn't sure I was ready for, trusting that readiness is often something you build in the doing, not something you wait to feel first. None of this was comfortable. Almost all of it made me anxious before I did it. But afterward, every single time, I felt more like myself, sturdier, more capable, less breakable. What surprised me most was that discomfort, chosen deliberately, didn't feel like suffering. It felt like contact, real contact with my own life, instead of a padded, distant version of it. Comfort had been keeping me safe from disappointment, but it had also been keeping me safe from growth, from depth, from the kind of pride that only comes from doing something hard and surviving it. I don't think comfort is the enemy, rest matters, and there's nothing noble about suffering for its own sake. But I no longer treat comfort as the goal. It's a tool I use after effort, not a shelter I hide in before it. These days, I try to notice when I'm reaching for the easy option out of fear rather than wisdom, and I try to choose the harder, true path more often than not. What I chase now is capability, the sense that I can meet whatever comes, not because life has gotten easier, but because I've gotten sturdier. I chase honesty, even when it's uncomfortable to say or hear. I chase the kind of growth that only shows up on the other side of resistance. It's a less predictable way to live, and some days it's genuinely harder. But it doesn't feel hollow anymore. It feels like my own life, fully occupied, rather than a comfortable room I was too afraid to leave. If there's one thing I'd want someone else to take from this, it's simple. Comfort feels safe, but it's often just a slower way of standing still. Growth was never going to be comfortable, and the moment I accepted that, I finally started moving.